Do you know there's 22 million millionaires here in the US and about 56 millionaires globally across the world? However, here in the US, there's only 12,000 private jets, more or less, owned by private entities. And worldwide, it's around 16 to 18,000 private jets. So what gives? What's the number difference? Are people buying it? Fractional share? You think everyone owns a private jet? Stay tuned to this episode where we talk about the different ways about owning and what maybe not everyone you see on TV or in your favorite magazines or TMZ or anything like that, how they all don't actually own their private jet. Hey, welcome back. This is Dio Sneddy Pellegrin here with the Pulse Advantage podcast. I'm with my business partner,
Daniel Rios, the CEO of Pulse Aviation.
And welcome back to our show, to this episode here, where we're going to talk about private jet ownership, chartering, and fractional ownership. So the three different ways ultimately you own a private jet, and how not necessarily what you see on TV or across social media, how not everyone actually owns a private jet. However, you still get access to a private jet thanks to the different ways of fractional ownership as well as chartering aspects. So Daniel, in this episode, obviously, we talked about this off camera, and we talked about, obviously anyone can buy a plane if you have the right money. But there are other options, right?
Of course.
In terms of owning or in terms of flying private, right? What are the other options? Obviously, we talked about them.
Obviously, we talked about in the past owning a jet, which is substantial financial commitment, really reserved for the very small percentage of people out there that could, you think about anything, right? Even when you're buying a car. Everybody's got their bracket of what they could afford because, certain level of cars, certain level of detail and the cost that goes into these things. Same thing goes with jets, as we've talked in previous episodes. If you're curious about that, you can go back to past episodes and check that out, how we break down maintenance costs and stuff like that. But then as the years developed where, back in the 70s and 80s, there was a small niche of people who could actually afford to travel in these things. Great entrepreneurs came along as, how do we give more affluent people access to these vehicles, right, to these planes, where you saw the emergence of jet cards, fractional share, and then outright chartering. And, there's also different levels of financial commitment that come with this stuff. And it's just going to be what's suitable for that traveler, how much they fly, how much they're willing to spend, and then actually cost comparison, right? So, hey, if I spend owning a plane outright, we talk tens of millions of dollars for a very nice jet, plus all the operating costs, paying for pilots, paying for insurance, the substantial costs that come with that. And then there are other tiers that came in with fractional share, where it's say, hey, you can own a part of this jet at 1/8 of a share, half of a share, 3/4 of a share, and then it allots you flying time throughout the year. So it gives you a lot more access, gives you the benefit of being an owner without the full financial obligation of actually outright owning a jet. And then you got more of like the charter operations that really started to spring up, which is basically like an Uber. It's on demand. Hey, I'm sitting in Lakeland, Florida. Again, like we talked in previous episodes, where I'm sitting in Lakeland, whatever, I got to pop up. I need to get up to New York City as fast as possible. What do? You pick up the phone, you call a broker. Hey, I need a plane this size, whatever size, mid-size, large cabin. And it's an on-demand thing. Hey, reposition, or if you got one available in Lakeland, I need to get on it, get this thing going, and get me up to my destination A to B. There's no other obligation besides the cost of that wet time for that aircraft.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, and you mentioned Uber, and that's kind of what chartering is.
Yeah.
And there's even chartering where there's an exclusive annual cost, right? I mean, you can either charter them outright, right? Like there's charter companies where you just call. You don't have to have a membership or anything. You pay a fee. However, there are charterings where there's a program, like a flex jet.
Jet cards.
A jet card.
Yeah, a jet card.
So you pay an annual fee, and then it's available to you so many hours at a specific rate. So
you can say, hey, I want a jet card for like 100 hours, and it's basically an open calendar. You have like a prepaid anything, right? So you prepay the card, and it's like I got 100 hours to fly this year. And, A to B is going to cost me 2.5 hours one way. So it's a 5-hour round trip. So you start knocking those hours down. And then you can recharge just like any other kind of prepaid program. I'm not too familiar how popular they are. I just know that a lot of companies offer them. So I'm going to assume that that's a very popular program for some people versus just outright chartering and not having any obligation to a plane. What's really popular is fractional share because that gives you like a timeshare on a property. Right. That'll give you, hey, I get 250 hours a year at 1/8 of an ownership, which opens up a calendar for you. And basically, it's this the type of plane. You know what plane you're flying on, what type of aircraft. And that's the popularity of companies like FlexJet, NetJets, Fly Exclusive. Those are the companies that really are the major players in fractional share aircraft.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, right, Dan, I mean, there's got to be an amount of hours that you fly a plane. I mean, you're not going to, unless if you have that expendable income and no reason.
Yeah. Oh, no,
you have that much money where it doesn't matter. I mean, actually, right across from this tarmac here, there is a hangar that has literally 2 jets that pretty much don't move often.
They don't move much. No.
But that's a different level of wealth that not everyone has. So, buying a jet, there's a specific hour amount that you have to fly in order for it to make sense, ultimately, as well.
Of course. I mean, you're going to justify the expense, right? So
exactly.
If you're somebody, I would say minimum, you wouldn't consider buying a jet unless you're flying at least 200 hours a year and having that at your access and ready to go whenever you need it, where you start considering that level of ownership. I mean, throughout my career, I've seen planes, and we call them hangar queens, because they sit in the hangar, they stay shiny, and they fly very little, but that owner obviously can afford it. Yep. But also it just gives him access for whenever he needs it. Some people are willing to pay for that level of luxury and convenience. So.
Yeah. We're not tax experts, but I'm pretty sure there's some tax savings and tax depreciation.
That's like everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, like
I'm
everything.
sure. And in the future, we will bring on some tax experts. So definitely stay tuned. We'll bring in tax experts to talk about the different tax codes and how in a private aviation you can save money. But now I do know that with fractional ownership, one of the neat things, or even if you don't fractional ownership and you just buy it outright, if you're not flying it enough, there is a way through chartering where you can recomp some of the costs, your annual costs, right? So for example, if I buy a plane, let's say it's $20 million, I'm only flying it 150 hours. Well, why let it sit when I can charter, right? You can go
there's many options.
Right.
You can dry lease a plane. So if you don't even want to get into the headaches of transporting people, on like an airline or like 135, because there's a lot of regulations that are involved in that, what your plane needs to go through to be able to do that, to get paid to charter people around. Dry leasing is becoming very popular, where that's where you approach other investors and say, hey, I got this Falcon 900. I'm willing to dry lease it, a lot of time, this and that gives another owner, kind of like a fractional, that gives another owner, okay, I have this slot of plane that I can use and I'm paying to use it. And that keeps you in that realm of, you're not chartering the plane. You're actually letting a second owner use the aircraft.
Exactly. Yeah, because ultimately, if you're chartering, you have to have that 135.
Oh, you have to. No, if you're transport for hire, you have to be a 135 per the FAA. You have to be, because if you do it outside of that realm, that's an illegal charter. And the ramifications for that, the fines are insane.
Okay. So ultimately, the buyer, if you buy a plane, or if you're fractional ownership, which is the 3 topics we've talked about, which really they're the only 3 ways you can own a jet or have access to a jet, is buying, fractional ownership, or chartering. The chartering and the fractional ownership is the way where it allows you to dry lease, where you don't need the 135 and you can just dry lease.
Fractional share, that's a 135. So that's your NetJets and FlexJets and all those guys. Chartering, same thing. That you can call NetJets and those guys and get a one-time charter. Gotcha. That's 135 category. They're getting, that aircraft is being paid to transport people.
I get it.
From their, start to finish. That puts you in the 135 category. If I own my own Falcon 900, or something else, subsequent, Gulfstream, whatever, and it's sitting in the hangar, and let's say you come along and like, hey man, I would like to fly in this thing, and I'm not willing to charter it. What I'd offer is say, hey, I can give you a dry lease on it. This way you put it on the plane to cover the operating costs, but I'm not profiting from it. It's just helping to keep the plane maintained and stuff like that.
That makes sense. The chartering obviously is a for-profit.
That's for profit.
Exactly.
So let's just use an easy number, right? The plane runs at $10,000 an hour on a charter. The company's profiting, whatever the percentages they're making off that, they're profiting off that flight. So that $10,000 is not just to cover the cost of the plane. It's paying people salaries, stuff like that. So you're actually getting paid to transport people.
So let's summarize and go back. So pros and cons of them. I mean, what's the pros and cons of buying your own jet?
Okay, so with jet ownership, there's it's like everything. It's pros and cons to everything, but the flexibility, the control of your scheduling, the destinations. I mean, access to like we talked in the past, wider range of airports, and there's huge tax benefits. Obviously, I'm not going to go into because I'm not a tax professional, but we all know that these major costs are going to have advantages on the taxes, right, for any business and operators. There's a lot of cons that come with it too, because the upfront investment is huge. I mean, you're talking big numbers. You're talking, numbers most people can't afford. And then you're responsible for the ongoing maintenance, all the operational costs that go with it, the insurances. And then obviously the biggest thing is the potential for depreciation. And that's a big thing with all these aircraft owners. If I put in 20 million on a jet, I want to sustain that as high and close to my purchase price as possible. So depreciation is always a huge con for owning your own jet.
This episode is brought to you by Pulse Aviation. Your journey to unparalleled aviation excellence begins with Pulse Aviation. Whether you're seeking to acquire the perfect private aircraft, ensuring its airworthiness with a comprehensive pre-buy inspection, or maintaining peak performance, Pulse Aviation delivers unmatched expertise and personalized service. Our certified technicians and experienced sales professionals are dedicated to exceeding your expectations. From sourcing the ideal aircraft to ensuring its long-term reliability, we handle every detail with precision and care. We understand that your time is valuable. That's why we offer seamless, efficient solutions tailored to your unique needs. Contact Pulse Aviation today. Send us an email at info@pulseaviation.com to learn how we can elevate your aviation experience. And now back to the show. Yeah, so I get that on the ownership. So obviously the pros and cons there away. How about that second category when it comes to fractional ownership? What is the pros and cons there?
So I think the biggest pro with when you're doing a fractional share is that your shared costs, right? So let's just use easy numbers. Let's say $1 million is the cost, right? So now you're sharing that $1 million amongst X amount of people. And let's just say your all-in would be a very small quarter of portion is your responsibility financially. Obviously with other little fees and stuff, but you now lowered your financial liability on that aircraft. The expenses are very predictable. So this is, if you're a big financial planner, this is what it's going to cost me to get in. This is what I'm going to be spending on that fractional, right? And then actually, you're also going to know the type of aircraft you have access to. So if you're in the mid-size jet category, that's the type of aircraft you're flying in. And most companies do have variety in those classes. So, there's different ranges depending on the availability of the aircraft, to move around, like try different jets and stuff like that. So that's a huge pro when it comes to fractional.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is when we started this video, you guys saw the numbers. I mean, there's 22 million millionaires here in the U.S. Only about 12,000 or 13,000 jets are owned by millionaires. Yeah. So obviously the number there shows it. But thanks to fractional ownership, you get a portion of that ownership into an airplane because you don't have to spend $20, $30 million yourself. You can divide that amongst two investors, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. However, obviously, depending on the amount of hours you guys want to share per year.
And the number of owners, which goes into the cons of this. There's a huge... So with fractional, if you don't understand it, let's just say you're in a room with 10 of your friends and you're sharing one thing. Now you're fighting with each other's schedules and who's doing what's the plans. And obviously, right, so that goes, obviously the con, significant upfront costs. I mean, these jets I can't even say that's a con at this point because these aircraft just require money. That's just what it is. So, but it's still considered a con, like, hey, it costs a lot of money up front. Ongoing management fees, some people like it, some people don't, some people understand it, some people just don't want to be bothered with it. So there's griping about that, about the extra fees and stuff like that. But obviously, pilots, flight attendants, catering, all the stuff that comes with these jets, it's like an HOA. You got to pay the fees up front so that these planes are maintained properly and operated properly. So that, and then obviously we just talked about it, the availability of these planes depending on everybody else's schedules, right? So you may have a special trip with your wife planned, let's say June 1st, right? It's a special time of year, but guess what? Hey, 20 other owners are on the same flight schedule, and guess what? It's a little bit tight right now, and it's kind of like a shuffle. And depending on the operator too, because some operators have a vast amount of jets, some don't. Some have, a 40 plane fleet and you're jockeying with everybody else to get these positions for flight hours on these jets. So that's a big con to fractional share.
Okay, yeah. So fractional ultimately opens up the jet life to more people with the income without having to own it all on your own.
Exactly.
So that makes sense. Okay, and then the last one, obviously, jet chartering. Lots of pros and cons. What are the options? What's the difference there? Or what are the pros and cons on the actual chartering of a jet?
I think the biggest pro is there's no category of jet that restricts you. So say if I'm flying by myself and I just need to go to New York, I'll jump on a Phenom, right? Hey, you have a Phenom, I need it now. And that definitely opens a window of travel, right? So I can go small, medium, large, depending on your needs, right? So if you're flying with a bunch of friends, you need a bigger jet, right? Because I got 10 passengers. We need to get to the Super Bowl, whatever, and we need a big jet to get us there. So that opens a lot of flexibility for that. There are zero responsibilities on a charter, and that's why it's very popular with travelers. Because
Yeah.
if that plane breaks, you get off it, you walk away. It's not my plane. I don't care.
Like-
I'm on my way.
Like an Airbnb. I
Yep.
mean, it's ultimately like
It's
an
a
Airbnb.
pay and go. It's a pay as you go.
You rent a nice home, a nice, beach house, whatever it is, and you just go enjoy it, and you're done.
Yeah, you get to enjoy all the luxuries of that jet, but if something goes wrong, you have zero obligation. Obviously, unless you damage the aircraft being reckless. But I've seen that in the past where passengers have wrecked the interiors, and obviously you're paying for that. You're not walking away from that, but you have an engine issue, you have a landing gear issue, you have flight control issues, avionics. That's not your obligation. And it's like, okay, we'll deboard, and it's not my problem. Get me another plane. So there's no obligation at all financially. Any kind of ownership headaches that come with that.
Which is likely the reason. I mean, it is the reason. I mean, I know celebrities, people of influence out there. Anytime you see really any newer, I mean, even celebrities who've been in the industry many years, they're likely chartered jet.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't own the jet.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're on demand chartering, just because they're wealthy, they're affluent, but to outright own a jet, I mean, disposable income or money that you have to invest in something like that, it really lowers, it really tightens that window of people that could actually go, here's 20, 40, $50 million for a jet that's mine. There's a very small percentage of people that could actually do that.
Exactly, and that's not counting what costs even more in the long run, and that's the fixed costs.
Yeah,
and the variable costs, then the gas and stuff like that. So, and then what are some of the cons of chartering? Because obviously there's a lot of great things. You don't have to worry about anything. But
you're going to offset those costs by higher operating hours. So let's just say if I own, a perfect example, if I own a Falcon 900, it's mine. My costs actually come down. My fixed costs at operating what we call wet time, that meaning engines running.
Right.
My operating costs as an owner, just on a 91, would be, let's just use easy numbers, like $4,000 an hour.
Right.
Now, if I charter that plane, you're talking $12,000 to $15,000 an hour to charter that plane. So all the stuff you're not responsible for, that hourly rate's going way up because that owner or that operator is going to recoup that cost to operate that plane. So that's one of the biggest things. So you're going to look to pay a lot more, and there's no guaranteed availability. Right. So sometimes you can be left high and dry. If it's Super Bowl or like Belmont Stakes, all these Formula One races, you think of anything where affluent people travel to, big events, and you're trying to get there with them, sometimes you'll call and the brokers will be like, hey, we have no availability. Right. We have none.
Or you're paying an even higher premium.
Even higher premium. Yeah.
Right, exactly. If it's 10, 12, 13, normally add 20, 30, 40%.
Oh, yeah.
Like for an event like a Super Bowl and things like that.
It's like a commodity, man. Right. When it's in demand, prices go up.
Exactly.
It's just what it is. And that's the nature of the business.
Yeah, so that's why some people just own a jet. I mean, because the cost, they can reduce it, control it a lot more. Chartering a jet, again, a lot of convenience, a lot of great pros, but it's going to cost you.
Yeah, but you think of people who charter too, they're leisure travelers.
Exactly.
Because if I own a Fortune 500 company, the last thing I'm going to do is charter a plane because my time is money, and getting to my meetings and operating my business, that time is so valuable. I don't have time for hiccups. I really don't. I know, hey, fuel my jet up, get my pilots ready, let's go. I got to go.
Yeah.
So
and that's the difference, because I personally have friends. I've had a lot of people who said, man, I actually thought I can charter a jet. I want to go to Vegas with the boys, a group of 5 or 6 of us. They said it was $30,000 round trip, or one way.
Yeah.
And they were just astounded by that. They just thought instantly the private aviation industry is super expensive.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it isn't, but it's just chartering is going to cost you so much more.
If you compare it to like first class flight in some airlines, if you break up 30,000 each way by say 10 people,
right,
that's really cheap.
Exactly.
You're paying for a first class ticket is what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that's one way to look at it too. If it's a large group of people going, hey, this trip is going to cost us whatever, $70,000 round trip.
Right. 4 or 5.
There's 10, 11 of us, and guess what? It's cheaper than getting on American Airlines and flying first class there.
And it's not so much the cheap. It's remember, in this industry, the private aviation, it's convenience.
Oh, it's big time.
It's all about. A lot of people think it's the jet set, the glamour. That plays a role in it because of the people you see who typically fly these things. But it's about time savings and convenience.
Yep, 100%.
And realistically, that convenience saves you time. And that's the reason people fly private, ultimately. I mean, hands down, some people charter planes to, live the lifestyle or pretend they live the lifestyle. But it's all the convenience that you get in flying private. And you experience that in all 3 of it. Whether you buy your plane outright, whether you fractional ownership, or whether you charter a jet, you get to experience the convenience. Like we ourselves are here in an FBO, which is a fixed base operator, and you can see when someone lands, they're literally here and they're in their car in minutes,
and they're gone.
And they're gone, and that's the difference. And same way on the way out. So.
Yeah.
And that obviously is
No
a difference.
TSA, no nothing. None of those headaches that we deal with on a day-to-day.
No headaches. If it is international, they actually have to.
They stop at customs.
They got to stop at customs and just go through immigration.
Not a big deal.
But that's not a big deal.
You're waiting 10 minutes on a ramp for customs to walk up, do your thing. All right, and we taxi you off to the FBOs.
Exactly. So, look, everyone, that's a summary of basically the three ways people have planes out there. You can either buy a plane outright, you can either charter a plane, which is probably the more convenient or the most used these days is people charter a plane, or you can fractional ownership. You know, a few of your buddies, investors get together, own a private jet, and share the hours per year. So, hopefully, you guys had a lot of information, a lot of value in this video. Definitely subscribe and like us and leave some comments down below. Let us know which way would you go if you had the income, if you had the level, or if even if you had the income to buy it but just think it's more convenient to just charter a jet. Let us know down below in the comments which way would you go regardless of funds that you had, whether buying, whether fractional, whether chartering. And with that, thank you for you guys watching. Click right here where you're going to see our previous video, and in this previous video we talked and highlighted the different types of jets, you know, from light all the way to heavy business class. And we thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you.